that because I think this, yeah, the thing you were talking about, they have an app called Uber Conference, and I'm trying to connect to it right now. Let's see, and it keeps disconnecting.
Hmm? No. Yeah, it's 11:36. Well, I might have to peace out, man. I was in Charlotte, man.
I was about time for you to head out.
Yeah, checkout's at 12. I got about 20 minutes, man.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. I'll go ahead.
I was hoping he would show up before. Like, I can still pack, man. I can pack. I ain't got much to pack up.
You can go ahead and do what you got to do for now, and just come back whenever. I mean, you can stay in the hangout, I guess, because I'm not sure if you'll.
Let it hang while I put stuff up, man. I'm gonna get ready.
There you go. And I'm trying to do this Uber conference thing on the side.
Uber.
Okay, he's having technical. Okay, he can. Yeah, I think. Okay, he can hear us. Yeah, he just put a message in the chat. So he's somewhere in limbo. I'm looking at the screenshot. Select allow for both Google Talk plugins in order to access the video call. Yeah, he has a. I mean, there's a blank screen and it has the icon, the Hangouts, the green and white icon, and it says see detailed instructions. And I think whatever browser that he's using, he's going to have to go in and allow the plugins in order to access the features to actually get in the Hangout.
He's probably not using Chrome.
He might not be using Chrome. That's the thing. I'm not sure what browser he's using. Yeah, he's in limbo. So if you're using Chrome, I think the little three dots in the top right corner will be what he wants to go to. I've not set up this thing in so long.
I checked for him in the chat. He's not listed there.
Well, there's kind of a waiting screen where you can click to join, and I think he's at where you would click to join, but it's not letting him because there's certain plugins that it needs to run in order to allow him have access to that button to click. Ooh. Okay, he's on Safari. I'm not too familiar with Safari. There should be that.
Safari may not work the best. Chrome has everything already built in.
Yeah, just use Chrome. Use Chrome, honestly. I don't think I know anybody who actually uses Safari.
It'll work, but the way that it accesses the stuff is different.
Man, I'm not sure how hostile Safari is with Google products. But I mean, it's
Safari's hostile with all of them, bro.
It does. I've been fuck with Safari since I was maybe 16, 17 years old.
I haven't started with it ever since I started using it now. I only learned about it just to know how to clear the cache. That was it.
Oh man, that brings me back to my Ubuntu days, man. Back when I was messing around with that stuff. Back when I had time.
Back to it, man. There's a lot of stuff that's changed now when it comes to operating systems and computers, as far as security goes.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things about messing around with Ubuntu is that you really didn't have to worry about viruses because no one was technically savvy enough to make a virus for it. And the second that somebody would, there were so many third-party developers that would find something like in an instant to counteract it. Like who has the time to work through that shit? So
the CIAA or the CIA.
Yeah, well, yeah, other than the CIA who was paid to sit there and do that, counterintelligence organizations. We'll go over in Fort Meade, over Fort Meade in Maryland. They the Cyber Command, they would have time enough to do that. But just your average Joe who's trying to scam folks, I don't think he'd even want it because like those folks are scary. The folks who are like third party indie developers that mess around with Ubuntu and these other platforms, they know so fucking much about that shit that you could customize every little thing, and that's one of the things that I like about it. But when you want to run like a game or something like that, you got to jump through a few hoops, because the platform will be updating so often that something would go wrong, and however the .exe file would execute from whatever file path, something small would change, and that it wouldn't execute properly. But the community was really good about finding workarounds before they found the actual problem. And within an hour or two, someone would post something on one of the main forums and go, hey, here's how you actually access it until we get it resolved. Next morning, issue's resolved. Like it's frustrating at times, but there were enough active people who really were on the ball with it. And none of these folks were paid. They were just there for the love of being able to have a platform which they could fully customize.
Yeah.
Computer science isn't even really my thing anymore. That's the funny thing. But I'm more into biology than anything else. Now, let's see. He's downloading Chrome right now. Okay, well, I mean, he can hear us. So one of the things I wanted to go over, just so he has an idea, is that United Gun Group. There he is, holding Chrome right now.
You use that? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead and mute the watch link, so he has an idea. Is that United Gun Group? There he is, holding Chrome right now.
You use that? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead and mute the watch link, so he has. Is that United Gun Group? There he is.
Well, for some reason it's playing. Hold on one second. Let me close another browser.
Yeah, I think you have us open in the other browser.
Well, for some reason it's playing. Hold on one second. Let me close another browser.
Yeah, I think you have us open in the other browser.
Yeah, this is weird.
Okay, you have a YouTube video of us open somewhere, either in the previous browser or your current one.
Yeah, this is weird. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm looking at the screen right now.
You have a YouTube video of us open somewhere, either.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah, this is weird. I'm going to exit out of Facebook. I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay.
I'm looking at the screen right now. Can everybody hear me clear?
Yeah, we can hear you clear.
Okay, perfect. I can hear everybody now. The third or the second conversation is gone. Thanks for agreeing to, or thanks for suggesting that we just go ahead and talk face to face or over the internet so we can get this issue cleared up.
Okay,
so
cool.
Who wants to start?
Well, I was tagged in this because a friend of mine brought this to my attention, and when I say this, I mean the issue or supposed issue of someone coming to a space where there's a very esoteric issue going on, where you have a definite racial dynamic with the gun ownership in America. And so it is too often the experience that we have people who are outside our particular demographic that really don't understand these nuanced scenarios. They come in and try and, I guess, overwrite the experiences and the empirical data that exists to show that there is a disparity. And so that's just to kind of give you an overview of what I was alerted to. One of the issues that I kind of see is that you've been treated ill, or people have been throwing some pejoratives at you, and I see that you return such pejoratives, which is a little disconcerting but understandable. But one of the interesting things that I find personally is that you seem to contradict yourself at times. And when I say that is when you try to make a moral proclamation, specifically, one about how one should be treated, you then take a step back when it comes to, let's say the video where you posted your interview, where you remove yourself, you almost completely divorce yourself of having a moral obligation. So my question is, how do you, on the one hand, bemoan the treatment that you've incurred from this group, but then also make a moral proclamation towards everyone else?
Let me go back to understanding the timeline of things is important, so you can kind of get a full background on what I was thinking and why. when I started United Gun Group, it was in response to Facebook prohibiting law-abiding citizens to buy and sell trade guns on their platform. I felt that it was an overreach of a social platform to come in there and change behavior that's been going on since the beginning and say, because we're morally opposed to A, B, and C, we're not going to allow you to do it, when their motto is connecting the world. When you connect the world, you're connecting people from racial, religion, political backgrounds all in one spot. Naturally, you're going to have people that disagree, but that's another topic. So when I formed United Gun Group, me and my wife sat down and we came to the conclusion that, okay, how are we going to govern this website and why? And one of the core values or the core missions I had is blanked out, but I assume you're still there. One of the things I said is I want a platform that's not based on my subjective opinions and values. I want a platform that guarantees equality and openness for everybody that wants to unite around one common goal, and that's the advancement of the Second Amendment. It was with that in mind, I said, okay, I'm not going to put my subjective opinions on the platform and dictate what our members do as long as it follows the law. And I wasn't thinking about Zimmerman when I made that decision. I was thinking more particularly about Moms Demand Action and assault weapons, because I figured there's going to be another mass shooting that involves an assault weapon or an AR-15 or something like that. So I knew at some point I was going to get petitioned or protested against to not allow assault weapons to be sold on the platform. And I made the decision right then and there that I don't care what outside opinions have to say. As long as it's legal, I'm going to allow it to happen. Fast forward to May, when Zimmerman sold the gun that he shot Trayvon with. I had millions of people telling me the guy's a murderer, don't let him do it. And I had millions of people tell me he was found not guilty, he's a law-abiding citizen, let him sell it. How do you make the decision? Who's right and who's wrong? Well, I agree that I'm not going to have an opinion. I'm going to allow law-abiding citizens to use the platform for legal behavior. That is how I justify taking my morality out of a situation, because, and I've challenged people, and I'll challenge you right now, if you can find a better way to manage the business than that, I'm all ears. But this is the only way I can think of that guarantees everybody that's a supporter of the Second Amendment, regardless if you're white, black, Hispanic, Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, or atheist, you can join, utilize its features. And if you don't like something, you have the ability to not join, to block it, to ignore it, or move on. But as long as it's legal behavior, that's where I stand. So I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. One of the first things I wanted to address is that you said that, I'm going to backtrack a bit, that because this had been going on for a while, and
when you say, what do you mean, because of what?
In reference to the procurement of weapons, when you said that when you had to go from Facebook to your own platform, I wanted to get a little bit more into that. When you said this had been, this has been happening for a while, was that a justification of sorts for your position, or I wanted to kind of stop you, but right there before we got too far off. But what do you mean by that?
Well, since Facebook allowed groups, you had groups dedicated to the buying and selling and trading of firearms. And then they built a community to where you have, in the United States, there's 140,000 FFLs. Out of those FFLs, they estimate 70,000 of them are home-based businesses. And out of those 70,000, how many of them are experts in e-commerce and understand how to market a business online? Most of them are guys that just have an FFL and they want to buy their 5 or 6 guns and sell them through Facebook. So you had thousands of people that were depending on Facebook for their livelihood. And then Facebook all of a sudden came in and said, nope, we're changing the rules. I thought that was inappropriate, in my opinion.
And you thought that was inappropriate because it had been going on for so long?
No, I didn't feel that it was up to a website to dictate morality to its members.
Oh, okay. Because
I'll give you an example. I am a Christian. I consider myself to be Republican leaning, but I'm not a Republican. We can talk about that later. But I'm a Christian, and so when you talk about my religious beliefs, I believe that homosexuality, biblically speaking, would be wrong. Now, there's an organization that's a gay rights group that's also a Second Amendment group that's on our platform. You have a certain percentage of the alt-right, right-wing Christians saying, don't let those gays on there. And I'll answer them the same way I'll answer anybody. Is what they're doing legal? If it's legal, then I don't have an opinion on it. So just like if a Muslim group or a black group or any other minority group wanted to join and utilize the platform, I will give them the same protections I would give everybody. And that's equal treatment under the law.
And I think that's fair. I think the point that I was trying to make, I got kind of lost in the rest of the speech that you had given. But I'll stop you from now on before we get too far off on the point that I wanted to make. But other than that, look, we'll move on.
Come back to it if you want.
Yeah, it's so far gone now that it was a small point. One of the issues that I see is I think it is interesting, especially as a Christian, that you find areas where you divorce yourself from morality simply because something is legal. You don't find that to be at least just a bit disconcerting, that because something is legal, you can and willingly remove morality from it?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I want to do it that way, and I'll continue doing it that way. I don't trust the government to always make the right decision. And the reason I view there should be a significant separation between church and state is because I don't trust the federal government. 50 years ago, it was illegal for a black and white person to marry. That's in most of our parents' lifetimes. I don't trust our government to make the right decisions. The reason, when you talk about disassociating my faith from how I make decisions, I do not think it's up to me to force my morality and subjective opinion on you. If you're an atheist, well, I may disagree with that personally, but I don't think it's up to me to force my Christian beliefs on you. Just like I don't think it's up to the government to force their beliefs on the people. If two law-abiding citizens want to do something, drugs, I don't think it's the government's business. Gay marriage, I don't think it's the government's business. Those are issues that the government needs to stay as far out of our lives, let us live our lives as free human beings. And I want to extend that philosophy to United Gun Group. I may not agree with somebody's personal decisions, but that's their choice. They're an adult. They're making their own decisions. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. It sounds more of a platform of a libertarian than anything else. Would you describe yourself as I guess in part, a libertarian?
No, there's a lot of things about the Libertarian Party that I agree with. There's things about the Democratic Party I agree with, and there's things about the Republican Party I agree with. George Washington said, be very wary of political parties. They will serve no purpose. And I think that the more you associate yourself with a political party, it's trying to lock you into a set political set of ideals. And there is not a political party that has my political views. So that's why I don't hang my head on any of the three. I'm a proud independent. I typically vote Republican because one of the core issues that I'm passionate about is abortion. I think life begins at conception. And with that in mind, I cannot vote for a candidate that supports abortion broadly.
But
now, I couldn't tell a woman that was raped or a number of circumstances, I'm sorry, lady, tough shit, you're going to have that child. I couldn't personally do it. So there again, I don't want to force my opinion on somebody else's.
The interesting thing about that, taking that position, is that the Republican stance would be to preclude all women from having abortions, and not just saying that it is immoral. So to me, that seems a bit almost contradictory for you to say that you want to divorce the government from thinking that it has control over people's lives and autonomy, but then at the same time support a position where it gives the government direct control over someone's reproductive rights.
Well, you have to understand, it's not a one-size-fits-all question. I view that while I agree that the government shouldn't be dictating certain decisions to the people, I also think when you're dealing with another human life, which I believe an embryo is a human life, so it's kind of a toss-up. whose rights trumps whose? The mother or the child? I think that child has a right to life, and I think that child's right to life supersedes the mother's right to make a decision.
Is that a personal belief or is that a fact?
That's my personal belief.
Okay, so we're dealing with your personal beliefs again, having a moral proclamation based on that, and then that being instituted as law across the board. You don't see how that's contradictory to the previous stance that you took?
No, because I'm telling you how I vote and why I vote.
Yeah, and I understand. You vote contradictory to what the stance that you previously said, where you wanted a separation between the state's power and human autonomy.
No, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't view it that way.
You don't have to view it that way, but it is a contradiction, and you do acknowledge that.
No, I don't. That's your opinion. There's a difference. There's a difference between fact and opinion.
Oh, okay.
It's my opinion that that is a life, and that life has a right to live. And I'm telling you why I can't vote for a Democrat that supports being pro-choice.
So we're making this position based off your opinion.
No, you're trying to tie too many things in together.
No, it's logically consistent, and that's I'm trying to understand, because in a lot of your posts you're actually not very consistent. You're doing something called special pleading. You make a proclamation on a stance, right, that you want the government to stay away from human autonomy, correct?
No. You're putting words in my mouth.
Okay, so you describe give me a summation of your stance based on what the government should and should not do as far as human beings.
I think that's a unfair summary, but go ahead.
No, I'm asking you to give me a summation.
Okay, I'm telling you that on most issues, I do not think it's up to the government to dictate morality to its people.
So, okay, so the government can pick and choose the issues.
Well, no, it's not the government picking and choosing, it's the people, because the people elect the government.
Obviously. Again, what issues is the government allowed to pick and choose based on input from the people?
This is a very long conversation. I think for most issues that come down to personal choice between consenting adults, the government should stay out of it.
Such as reproductive rights?
Pardon?
Such as reproductive rights?
On reproductive rights as a whole, a lot of it, yes. But as far as abortion, I personally, it's not. You see, you're trying to make a conclusion based on the wrong assumption. What I'm saying is, a woman has the right to choose what goes on in her body, unless there's another life that's dependent on her body that she created. I do not think that woman or husband have a right to end that life arbitrarily because they're like, oh shit, oops.
Okay, so again, we're going back to opinion and not fact, and that's why I made that distinction earlier. So you've specifically chosen this facet of reproductive life based on your opinion, but now you've also chosen a platform that contradicts your previous statement about how the government should and should not act. So then the question is, why should everyone else jump aboard that when you're clearly special pleading for issues that are based on solely on your opinion and not based on facts?
I have no idea what you tried to say.
Okay, I'll try and make
talk to me like I'm 5 years old.
Okay, so you're picking and choosing while you're trying to also speak broadly. Do you know what special pleading is?
Yes.
Okay, you're special pleading,
okay.
Essentially. Okay, that you do know that's a logical fallacy.
Do you special plead, or are you consistent across the board?
I am very consistent. I'm actually able to move my position based on the preponderance of evidence for any proposition given.
Are you pro-life or pro-choice?
I am pro-choice, actually.
Do you believe a life begins at conception?
No.
When does that person become a life?
It becomes a life the second that they are able to be wrested from the womb, and up till that, I would say 36 to 42 weeks before that.
Okay. So your wife, are you married?
Yes.
Okay. Your wife is 33, or did you say 32 weeks or 33 weeks?
I say 32 to around 40 weeks. You could consider that life.
Your wife is 31 weeks pregnant. A guy walks into a store that she's at, pops her in the head, and kills her to rob her for her purse. Should that guy get charged with 1 or 2 murders?
1 murder.
You see, I disagree. So
okay, is it based on fact or opinion?
It's based on the way I view it.
Opinion.
Okay, so yours is based on opinion too.
No, mine actually based on fact. So we can say that.
Okay, so no,
there's a developmental difference. There's a developmental difference
based on your opinion.
No, it's actually based on fact, because if we use an analogy, is an acorn a tree or is it a potential tree?
Well, some babies can survive out of the womb at 31 weeks.
At some babies. We're not talking about some babies. Is an acorn a tree or a potential tree?
It is a potential tree.
Okay, so it's not a tree. So it does not have the qualities of what would be considered a tree.
What are your qualifications of being a tree? Or what are your qualifications of being alive?
I don't know, being able to metabolize without being parasitic.
Okay, so if you're 31, you just said 32 weeks. Now some babies can survive at 29 weeks. Is that a life?
Oh, cool. If they've been rested from the womb, which was my other stipulation, yes.
Okay, well, I disagree with you.
Okay.
So,
is that based on medical science or based on your opinion?
Medical science.
Really?
Yes.
So medical. Okay. So, and again, this actually falls into my other category, being rested from the womb. If they can survive, great. They're granted personhood.
Okay. But so, what makes you right and me wrong?
Medical science. Again, I defer to the preponderance of evidence.
Okay. Medical science can prove that a 27 or they've had babies as far as 24 weeks survive outside of the womb.
If that is the preponderance of evidence given for that claim, then I will gladly accept it and adjust my position.
Okay.
But it doesn't seem as though but that's what's interesting about our positions, is that yours is based on how you feel and not necessarily evidence for the claim. You don't see the issue with that?
Well, I disagree with what you're saying. So
you disagree with medical science?
No, I disagree with what you're saying.
And what I'm saying is based on medical science.
You're saying I only base my opinions on how I feel and not fact.
And then when I asked, is your opinion based on medical fact, your response was?
I said, well, it depends.
It depends. Why should it? Well, hold on. So here we go again. It depends. Now, if your position is not based on fact and it depends, it seems a bit frivolous, don't you think?
Not everything is black and white.
I didn't say it was.
Okay. But you're trying to get me, you're wanting to argue over hypotheticals that have no bearing on, I think, why this conversation was an issue.
You brought in the hypothetical, sir, not me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm just following the course of the conversation.
Okay, what did you want to achieve by having this conversation? Let's start there.
I was curious, actually. I was curious if you were as consistent with some of your positions as you kind of claim to be, because I'm looking over the contents of this conversation, and you would, on the one hand, make moral proclamations and then go back and say that you divorce yourself from it and it seems as though it's just based on your convenience and not any type of logical, thought.
That would be your opinion.
No, that'd actually be fact. I actually copied.
Give me an example. Let's go through this exercise. Give me an example.
Sure. Okay.
I have about another 2 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. Let's see. So, actually, based on the morality. So, let's go with the Black Lives Matter claim. I like that one. Okay. By the way, I'm not a real big fan of the organization myself, but I like to be very charitable with my interpretation of events and people and so on and so forth. So, with your comment towards Levi Mateus, when Black Lives Matter marches and chants "kill pigs" or "fry them like bacon," gangs beat up a single white man for no reason. Are they doing more damage than good? Think about the organizations you associate with. Black Lives Matter isn't helping. That is a guilt by association fallacy, right? Above that, before you actually type that, it is very, very interesting, because you were actually trying to, I guess, call out somebody else for lumping all Republicans in with others, which would be wrong, which would be a hasty generalization. So how, on the one hand, are you upset that he was lumping in all Republicans and with racists and so on and so forth, but then you turn around and make the same type of fallacious argument based on the same justification?
When he was trying to lump Republicans, when he made the comment, he lumped Republicans and police into one category.
Mm-hmm.
Are there black police officers?
Yes, of course.
Now, do you think those black police officers are racist towards black people?
Yes.
Is that based on opinion or fact?
That's actually based on fact. There's actually been a few movies.
Let me hear that. Let me hear your facts to back that up.
Okay, so if you've actually, are you familiar with the Fraternal Order of Black Police Officers?
Well, I knew it existed. I wouldn't say I've read up on it.
Okay. Are you familiar? Or so you're not familiar with any of their platforms or anything that they've said as to why they've established this organization?
No, I have not. I'm not. I told
Okay.
you. I haven't read up on
So if you had to guess why they needed a separate organization, what would it be?
it. I don't like to guess. Why don't you tell
Okay.
me why?
Because they've publicly acknowledged the bigotry of their fellow officers and that how they themselves have been treated, especially concerning the Fraternal Order of Police, the overarching organization that kind of acts as a giant union for all law enforcement. I also have the personal testimony of a former New York City police officer and who is now a lawyer. And actually, no, he's actually a law professor.
Okay.
So that alone really gives you some insight as to, yes, there are black officers who have internalized anti-blackness. They've internalized a lot of negative racial stereotypes and have acted as agents of this horrible thing.
Is the question, are there racist cops, or is the question, are all black cops racist?
That was your question. The point that I was making was that your assertion toward Mr. Levi was that he should not have lumped people into these groups just because some of them are bad. But you've actually done the same thing when you've made a guilt by association fallacy toward Black Lives Matter and the other gentleman.
Let me go back and read that again.
Go for it. It's up there. Let me see if I can.
Real quick.
Okay, let's see. Might have been the first one. Oh, those are some slurs. Not interested in those. Okay, yeah, Levi Mateus, and yeah, you're right underneath it. So let me reply, and I'll tag you. So, yeah, Levi Mateus actually mentions, well, we get on gun groups that don't say black gun group, then come back and tell us about bigotry there. You might not notice when they post a pic of a high point and call it the ghetto gun, or say that they are ready for Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives Matter come into their neighborhood to burn it down. The only racism on Facebook is when Facebook owners stop and delete content pertaining to race. This is bigotry. And then underneath it, you tell him not to associate with Black Lives Matters. I actually tagged you in the original one.
Okay.
And then your reasoning behind that is because Black Lives Matter isn't helping. And before that, you proceed that by saying, think about organizations you associate with. I find that really interesting because not even 2 comments afterwards, you have George Holt IV making the connection between the Ku Klux Klan and other organizations. And then you talk about the justifying Black Lives Matter's bad actions and saying that you're just as bad as them. So it's, on the one hand, you find it acceptable to make guilt by associations for certain groups, but then when it comes to other groups and the documented discrimination with other groups that you would more readily identify with, you can overlook that and actually go as far as to defend them.
What other group do you say I identify with?
The identify with the Republicans, because you didn't like how Republicans were being lumped in with the KKK and supposedly racist.
You're saying I identify with the Republicans, not me.
You actually said that you identify as a right-leaning Republican. You said at the beginning of this conversation.
That's not what I said. What I said was, I don't. If you listen to everything I said, I don't identify with any of them entirely, because none of them fit my exact views. Do you remember me saying that?
I do, and I didn't say that you identify with them entirely.
I think I also said there are parts from the Democratic Party I agree with. There's parts from the Libertarian. There's parts from the Republican Party I agree with. Did I not say that?
You did say that, but then actually later in this conversation,
now you're trying to lump me in as well. Mostly you identify with Republicans. I didn't say that. You said that.
I know what I'm trying to get across, because that actually goes into what I was actually about to say, where you actually begin to denigrate the Democrats as rich white men, I believe. I have not seen you actually defend them the same way you have Republicans on this thread.
Okay, well, let me put it this way. The Republicans, when you deal with the left community, the Democrats or the liberals, whatever you want to call that segment, they like to say Republicans are just rich white guys. Well, on the Republican ticket this year, you had a black guy and 2 Hispanics. On the Republican ticket this year, you had 3 old rich white people. You had Bernie Sanders sit there and say the rich don't pay their fair share when Donald Trump paid a higher tax rate than he did. So, I mean, I think the Democratic Party in particular has a lot of hypocrisy, in my opinion.
Excuse me, sir. I'd like to interject on this. That one comment that you made about Donald Trump paying a higher rate and trying to conflate that with the fair share. Even though he might pay a higher rate, and I don't even think he pays a higher rate. I think he might pay more money out. I don't even think it's a higher rate. I think he pays more money out.
Let me clarify that to you. Before we move on.
Sir, let me finish.
Okay.
What he pays out as being a fair share of what he actually makes, it's not a fair share. Just because he makes more money and he pays out more doesn't mean it's equivalent. Say I make nowhere near what he makes.
You see, the reason I want to interject is because what you're saying is not accurate. The last time Donald Trump's tax returns were revealed, Rachel Maddow went on MSNBC on the Rachel Maddow Factor, whatever her show is called, and made this big spectacle about, I got Donald Trump's tax returns, they were leaked to us, and I'm going to expose them. Donald Trump paid 25% in federal income tax. Bernie Sanders paid 13%. Percentage is percentage, not amount. Donald Trump paid that year like $40 million in federal income tax. So don't sit there and say, well, technically Donald Trump paid a less percentage. No, we're talking percentages here because percentages.
No, actually, we're talking about fair share. You're the one who said fair share. Now, fair share.
Fair share? You just tried to tell me that Donald Trump paid a lower percentage.
Then I did?
No.
I paid more out. No, did I ever say Bernie Sanders? I'm trying to make this.
I didn't just say Bernie Sanders. You just said Donald Trump paid a lower share of taxes than somebody. You tried to say something like that. When I just gave you, and I can send you the article right now. In fact, let me find it real quick. Okay, forgive the interference for a second.
You can put the link in the side chat.
I don't want the video. I want the article that explains it all. But we're getting onto a lot of different things. Now, here's the thing. I don't want to use the Blaze. That's the first one that comes up because you guys people instantly say, oh, it's the Blaze. You can't trust it. So give me a website you believe it on. Forbes, New York Times?
Reuters?
The first ones are The Blaze, Washington Post, MSNBC, Vulture, Forbes.
I mean, it's up to EM here because I can't say that I'm partial to any particular news outlet other than Reuters, and that's because they're not based in the U.S.
Well, you hit a point that I love it when people make. I love it when people sit there and say, "Oh, you can't quote Fox News; they're biased." What news source is not biased?
Well, they're all going to be biased now. There are very few objective news outlets, and I'm fully willing to admit that. And so, if I read something from Fox News, I will go to the MSNBC or some of the other ones to see if the narrative has changed, or if the facts have changed, but the narrative is different. Because I can easily read between the lines to discern what's going on. It doesn't take, I guess, that much effort to really parse out what the facts matter.
One of my favorite quotes was from Denzel Washington, and he said it this past year: "If you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. If you watch the news, you're misinformed." And I think that might be the truest statement that has ever been said. But just to move this one along, I'm going to get Forbes. I'm going to post a link to that article that should. Where do you want me to post this?
Do you see the side chat? Let me see. I'm typing here in the side chat. Look on your right-hand side. Next, oh yeah, on the right-hand side, you should see it says live and has a little hang-up icon at the top. Actually, I just thought about something. Look on your left-hand side, and you should see Google, and you'll see a black bar.
Yeah, there it is in Forbes that explains. It should explain in there that Donald Trump paid 25% taxes and Bernie Sanders paid like 13% for the year reported.
Okay, so Bernie didn't pay his fair share, but I, as an individual that makes infinitely less than Donald Trump, that actually is a resident of the same state that he is, I paid 30%.
Okay.
My 30%, his 25%, what I'm saying, a fair share, 25% of his income is that really fair as opposed to my 30%?
Well, determine what is fair and who's making the assertion of what is fair.
You are the one that said fair share. I'm like, well, is that fair? I'm asking.
What was the denotation of fair share when you stated it?
Well, here's the thing. Fair share changes every election season. But Donald Trump paid the taxes he was required to pay. So that should be the end of the story. If you don't like how much the percentage he paid, whose fault is that? Anybody?
This is not my point. I'm asking what was the denotation. I have no stake in this particular claim.
Where'd that other person go?
I'm right here.
If you don't like the amount that Donald Trump paid, whose fault is that? Who's to blame?
I have no idea.
Yeah, you do. You just don't want to admit it.
No, I have no idea because I never said I did not like. I said I asked you what is a fair share.
What is a fair share and who determines that?
If I'm asking you what a fair share is, how can you put that question back on me? That's all I'm asking. You are the one.
Tell me if you disagree with me. A fair share is what the IRS tells you owe. Is that a fair share?
I would say so.
Okay. Now, if Donald Trump did not pay what he was supposed to pay, do you think with his tax returns being public, it would have been an issue by now?
I have no idea.
Okay. I'm pretty sure if Donald Trump, since he gets audited every year, I'm pretty sure if there is anything even close to being inappropriate.
He gets audited every year?
Yes. I get audited every year.
I don't.
When you're self-employed, you make a good amount of money and you have large charitable contributions, you get audited. I guarantee you.
I mean, I'm not going to take your experience and Donald Trump experience to be the norm. I mean, if that's what you say, that's what you say. I have no way of knowing whether that's true or not. But yeah, I don't.
Okay.
My knowledge, outside of you saying it, I've never heard anything about him being audited every year.
Yeah, you can. You want me to pull an article that verifies that, or can you take my word for it?
You can pull an article if you feel. Outside of you saying it, I don't.
Okay. Have we talked about this particular discussion enough about Donald Trump taxes?
Question that he wanted to ask you about what was going on in the group, and then you took it someplace else. I
answered the question that he asked me, and I'll answer any question anybody wants to ask me. So the floor is open.
Yeah, I was just letting Ian speak because I'd been monopolizing a lot of the time. But
this is a good conversation. I appreciate your time.
Well, no, it's not. I have these kind of conversations all the time, not about this topic, but just I have conversations through this platform. And I was speaking to Brad, your interlocutor from earlier. He wants to use this platform a bit more, and so I may be getting with him to kind of show him the ropes as far as how he can help promote that.
I never knew this existed, so I appreciate it as well.
It's not a problem. If you want to use this, build up your own YouTube channel and have live discussions and engage with detractors, I'd say go for it. Go forth.
I think you're selling yourself short if you don't deliberately engage people you disagree with.
I would agree with that. Avoiding people and avoiding criticism is not how one grows.
It's a lot of people. I've been in this group for about 6 weeks now, and just yesterday I had the first real issue. There's been mild issues, nothing to the extent of it was yesterday. But the second I posted or asked my first question 6 weeks ago, I immediately had people throwing a fit on why is this white boy in this group? And the fact that I was invited to this group didn't matter. The fact that the moderator of the group welcomes me here didn't matter. The fact that I was a white person, and I asked right then and there, why should the color of my skin dictate my acceptance in a group or not?
That's a good question.
And,
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to continue on that, but if you had a question, I'd be more than happy to answer it.
Well, I was actually going to fill you in as to why. I don't necessarily agree with the deluge of racial epithets thrown at you, but I do understand why some may be apprehensive, especially since a lot of these groups, so aptly named Black, et cetera, are more of, I guess you could call them refuges from some of the main groups. So I can only assume that there's a gun owners politics group that this was actually spawned from. And because you will have just swaths, and I mean just large numbers of white detractors from whatever these groups are, that will essentially kill a thread when there is ample evidence showing some type of bias, some type of disparities, or anything that goes against their opinions. And so these groups are, they act as, I guess you could, if you want to call them a safe space, and some of them are. Others are just areas where you, as a person of color, can actually breathe and find some semblance of brotherhood or sisterhood with other people who have experienced, similar things, and discuss these issues rather than being, browbeaten at every corner.
No, and I understand that, and I get that. And I don't per se have a problem with Black people having a group that is only for Black people. But the group that we're speaking of is not designed for only Black people, according to the guy that created the group. So,
and I think that comes with the creator of the group, or the moderators, expressing that to the people in the group, because I've been a part of a similar group where they do have a ban on people of certain demographics. While that may seem a bit disconcerting, it acts again as a refuge from what I had spoken about before. But that was openly communicated with the people in the group, and unfortunately the owner of this group, or the admin, or whoever, has not communicated that effectively at all.
Well, he said that repeatedly for the 6 weeks that I've been in here, every time somebody called me out for being white. So I understand you may not have seen it, but Stan has adamantly said, his name is Stan, he has adamantly said people of all colors are welcome here. And then people say, okay, Todd, why do you want to be in this group? A lot of people ask me that question. Every time they find out I'm white, the next question is, why do you want to be in this group? Well, go back to when I created United Gun Group. I don't want to create the largest network of alt-right gun owners. I want to create the largest network of Second Amendment enthusiasts. That includes people of all races, religions, non-religions, backgrounds, everything you can combine. And I'm in numerous groups that don't fit my demographics, but because I want to feel and hear the pulse of the people. And there are times that when I see something that I find it hard not to comment or ask a question or interject my thoughts. So it's not that I'm wanting to bully anybody, and it's not that I'm wanting to be bullied, but I think having a thoughtful, articulate conversation like the one we are having right now helps everybody. I'll never know what it's like to be a Black gun owner in America. I won't. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to listen. And at times, if somebody says something that's different from the way I see it or different from my viewpoint, I'm going to respond. Sometimes, not all the times. There's many times I see stuff in this group that I adamantly disagree with, but I don't think it's worth the time to comment on it because it's just going to be met with criticism or hatred. So there's lots of times I just pass. And please forgive me. I'm here with both of my kids today, working from home. So
no, that's fine. I have kids, so I mean, I have a kid, so I understand definitely how they can be mischievous. One of the interesting things that
Carly.
One of the interesting things that I find is that when you immerse yourself into a group of another demographic, and it may be me going into a Puerto Rican group, I need to do more listening than talking. And you had mentioned that earlier, but one of the key things that people look for is not how you necessarily present yourself. It's some of the things that you are responding to and how you're responding to it. So one of the things that I caught on to earlier is that you were actually repeating some misinformation about Black Lives Matter. And I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of them, but I am charitable enough to depict them in the most accurate light. And actually, I'll post a link here in the side where the whole the chanting from Black Lives Matter, supposedly saying that they wanted to kill police officers or something to that effect. That's actually from an unrelated group years prior. And someone posted that and tried to label Black Lives Matter as that group when in fact it was another group entirely.
I understand your point in a Snopes article, but there isn't one time when, I'll find it for you right now.
I did want to say that because people aren't as articulate as myself, I don't think that you should preclude them from having conversation. That's not to say that, you know, you should accept just the deluge of racial epithets thrown at you, but some hostility is to be expected and some suspicion because of some of the things that you have said. And they've actually piqued my interest and hence this conversation because they seem to be the narrative of someone who is not as well as, I guess, how can I say this? Not as well in tune with what actually goes on inside Black circles, but as more of someone who kind of casually peruses these groups and has maybe a less than cursory understanding of these dynamics.
Okay, I'm going to post the article right now. CBS News, I assume they're liberal enough for you?
I didn't say I was liberal.
I wasn't saying you're liberal. I said that CBS News is liberal enough.
Why would the liberalism of an article matter to me?
Well, if it was from Fox News, you would probably discredit it pretty quick, saying it might be skewed. This is from CBS News. The exact article I was referring to is when Black Lives Matter was protesting, saying pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon. So that just happened in 2015. That was the most recent, or that was the article I was referring to.
Is there any particular context given to this chant?
Protesters in a Black Lives Matter march held outside the Minnesota State Fair over the weekend were captured yelling pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon, a statement that saw law enforcement.
I don't understand the context of the chant.
Well,
what does that actually mean?
Pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon.
Okay, so I understand the pigs reference is a reference to cops. Is fry 'em like bacon actually like coating them in oil and flour and cooking them?
Well,
or is that a metaphor?
I don't cook bacon that way. I assume it's a metaphor talking about, the way I would interpret it is talking about killing cops.
So frying and killing are synonymous.
In this context, yes.
I'm at a loss as to how you came to that conclusion.
What do you think it means when an organization called Black Lives Matter protests police saying pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon? What conclusion do you come to?
Police officers protected by the thin blue line need to be persecuted to the furthest extent of the law, using organizations such as, I don't know, the Southern Poverty Law Center, if they're Klansmen, or, you know, the ACLU.
Okay.
I'd like to point out something. It seems as if you're saying that
who am I speaking with?
Group was Black Lives Matter. This particular chant means something specific.
Well, hold on. Who are you, by the way?
EM. I'm the person that was talking to you about.
Okay.
But it seems because you made it a point to say Black Lives Matter was chanting this. Would it change if it was not Black Lives Matter, or is it simply that because so people that were at a Black Lives Matter rally said this?
Well, I'm just reading to you what the news article said. Now, But are you posing the question, what if the news article didn't say Black Lives Matter? What if it just said black protesters?
No. You said Black Lives Matter was saying this. You didn't read it from out of the article. You made a point to say that Black Lives Matter was saying this. Therefore, X, Y. Therefore, it means this. You said that. So I'm asking you, if it had been said by the KKK, would it mean the same thing to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
When anybody is protesting and they're chanting "pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon," so I don't care if that's from Black Lives Matter, the Latter-day Saint Church, whoever's the KKK, the neo-Nazis. In my opinion, they're wishing for cops to be dead or killed or hurt.
If I'm at Lollapalooza and I'm Indian and I say pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon, you're going to assume that I'm talking about police at Lollapalooza, and I'm Indian.
Your analogy is absurd, and I apologize. But you're trying to these people weren't at Lollapalooza partying.
But you just said earlier that it doesn't matter where or who, it means something specific.
Well,
she actually has a point. You did say that.
Okay. Well, if I have a dozen 15-year-olds at church with tambourines and a guitar singing "pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon," well, that's going to mean a little something different than a bunch of Black Lives Matter members protesting police saying the same thing.
So context matters.
Context always matters.
So what is the context? Okay, so that goes back to my question. What is the context of this chant?
Well, tell me if we agree that they're talking about killing cops.
No.
Okay. Well,
what indication to you is that killing a cop? Because fry is not the same thing as kill. You can fry something and not kill it.
Give me an example of what you fry that's not dead.
You can actually, you can fry anything, literally. You could take a rat and dump it in oil and fry it for 10 seconds and it could still be alive. And again, I mean, if you want to be literal, but I'm assuming that you're taking the word fry to be some type of metaphor, correct?
Well, I think any rational person would take it to be a metaphor, and
it being intuitive doesn't mean it's rational. There's a difference between.
My point is, my question was, name one thing that you fry that is not dead.
Again, are we talking about literal frying or figuratively frying something?
Well, talk about anything that you fry.
Again, literally or figurative. Okay. So pigs. So well, hold on for a second. So pigs. The word pigs in that chant is not literal. It's figurative. It's a metaphor for cops. But the word fry is literal. How does that make sense in any way, shape, or form?
Okay. So you listen to pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. You don't view that as speaking about doing harm to cops.
I don't know because I don't know the context, but I know it's a metaphor for something.
Read the article and tell me what you think.
Actually, I've seen this article before. It's the same one that I've actually read when it first came out. And I told you what my interpretation was when I first saw this. And that the first thing that I tend to ask people is, what's the context behind this chant? Because none of them know. None of them. Absolutely no one knows the context except the people who are chanting it. So what people ended up doing was applying the least charitable interpretation they could, even ones that don't even make sense. This is the one you just mentioned, and then trying to make it stick. And this weird like post hoc explanation that you somehow take. Well, hold on for a second. You can somehow take a chant that is meant to be a metaphor, but then you're taking parts of it to be literal with no rhyme or reason, and that's so strange.
Oh no! Oh my God. You're so far out in left field on this one.
How am I left field that I'm taking a chance?
Let's just move on from this topic.
Well, hold on. I want to stay on this because it really shows something that I was trying to show in the group. You're picking and choosing things based on your intuition, but that intuition, once examined, makes absolutely no sense. When do you, in any way, shape, or form, interpret a line from something that is a known metaphor to be literal?
Okay. The point is, I think anybody out there would view that as talking about harming cops. That's how I interpret it. That's how the media interpreted it.
So wait, hold on, here we go. Hold on for a second. So the media now, the same media that you acknowledged before as being biased, you're now leaning on their judgment to come to your conclusion?
No.
You just said you deferred to the media.
No. I said I read it. I said
okay.
it. I said I read it, and I feel that they're talking about harming police officers. And the media, just happens to agree with me at that time. So pretty much everybody except for you thinks they're talking about doing harm to cops.
Okay, so you know what an argument ad populum is?
No, explain it to me.
Okay, so an argument ad populum is that you're concluding something is right because the group of people, a large number of people, simply agree with it, and not based on evidence. It's right by virtue of number of people who agree.
How are you doing the same? How are you doing anything any different?
No, I'm saying that I don't know the context. You asked me how I would interpret it. And that's based on the fact that it is a metaphor, and I told you what it could possibly be. But I kept reiterating this point that there is no context given because the people who said the chant have not been contacted. I'm pretty sure I stated that several times.
No, you did. But
So,
my point is, hold on. My point is that nobody out there argued the point that they weren't talking about harming cops.
who is anybody?
Point until now.
Who did you actually seek out to try and did you actually contact Black Lives Matters?
No, I didn't. Did you?
So no, because I didn't need to.
Okay.
But I don't have a stake. Why would if I don't have a stake in this, if I don't have a position on it, then why would I contact them? You obviously do. So if you were really that intent on trying to figure out that,
I don't really care. I'm just giving an
well,
example.
you cared enough to give an example, and so that assumes that you have evidence to this claim to some degree.
Pause real quick. Pause. Now, if your logical argument holds true right then and there, then go back to Levi and ask him if he's reached out to Republicans or whoever else he mentioned in his speech about people he didn't like.
Why would I hold a different standard? If he wants to make that claim, then that's based on him to provide that. That's his burden of proof.
Okay.
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
Would you accept the opinion of a member of law enforcement on this particular topic? Would you see any validity in a member of law enforcement giving their opinion on this particular topic?
Well, if they can pass the gentleman that's holding this meeting, if they can pass his test, to where if that police officer asked Black Lives Matter what they meant, and
No, I didn't say a police officer. I said a member of law enforcement.
okay,
I could be a cop.
well, I don't know. It depends on what they said. I'd have to listen to it, but so
depending on what a member of law enforcement had to say about this particular incident, that's going to dictate the validity of what they have to say in your mind.
No, I've already made up my mind on what I interpret them chanting.
That's the validity of what the member of law enforcement has to say.
That it would not influence my opinion.
Okay, so
I'm not saying that every one of those people out there chanting that wanted to kill.
Give you an actual member of law enforcement can give you an interpretation of how they see this chant, which is attacking members of law enforcement, and you would not take what they had to say into consideration. It would not have any impact if an actual member of law enforcement told you how this made them feel.
Probably not. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But what I'm telling you is I've read enough about this particular issue to think that those people out there were chanting, wanting to harm cops. Now, when
and I'm saying if a member of law enforcement,
Alfred, hold on, Alfred, when you brought up the point of did I actually talk to him or interview him or seek out Black Lives Matter? No, I didn't, and I guarantee you, EM, the person you're talking about, probably didn't do the same thing. So,
what are you talking about?
I'm talking about what you're talking about.
Didn't person of law? I'm talking about a person of law enforcement giving you their opinion.
You just said the right thing. Their opinion.
And I said with their opinion, validity to you. If it didn't go along with what you already held in your mind, it wouldn't sway. It wouldn't mean anything because you think what you think.
I don't know. I'd have to look at the evidence to make a determination.
Okay, well, I, as a black member of law enforcement, I'm a black member of law enforcement.
Yep.
No, I didn't take it that way.
How did you perceive it?
As a bunch of people at upset. I didn't literally mean they wanted to kill me. Because actually, I'm a supporter of Black Lives Matter, and I'm a member of law enforcement. And I didn't take it as them wanting to kill me or anybody else.
Well, here's the thing. It wouldn't have made national and world headlines if they were talking about let's prosecute him really good. So,
it made national and international headlines because
we need to move on to the next topic.
Their interpretation of what's being said.
EM, I don't have unlimited time to talk about this. I was wanting to do the group the respect to answer some of these questions head on, but can we move on to the next topic real quick because I do have to get going.
Okay, that's fine. I'll have definitely time later this week. We can continue this discussion. One of the interesting things, even throughout this conversation, that I've noticed is that you kind of couch things either left or right. It seems as though you give the facade of someone who wants to be a centrist, but only when it comes to defense of some of your positions. And I'll give you an example. Just recently, when you assumed that giving me this Forbes or whatever it was link, that it was somehow liberal enough. And one of the things that I've noticed is when I'm talking to people, they portray a lot of who they are and what they feel, and they really don't realize it. And then I hone in on that. And the assumption that I am somehow a self-identified liberal is a very interesting one, because from your previous statement about how you somewhat lean toward the right, that itself is very, I guess you could say, typical of someone who, like I said, you want to portray yourself one way, but then I'm getting a completely different feeling based on what you're actually saying. You understand where I'm coming from?
Hold on. I got to interject something.
Mm-hmm.
When you called me, when I asked you, and it was the CBS article, I asked you if that was liberal enough for you. And then you said, I'm not a liberal. And then I replied, I didn't say you were a liberal. I asked you if that news source was liberal enough for you. Now, 10 minutes later in the conversation, you go back to, Todd, you said I was a liberal, which I didn't.
Implicitly, why would I want something liberal enough if I didn't adhere to their particular brand of politics?
That's something you would have to answer.
No, that's implied by your statement. Why would I want?
I had the preconceived notion that if it was from a right-wing news source, that you would discredit it.
Okay, so that would mean by default, then I would have to be leaning toward the left or liberal side, correct?
No.
Okay, so if I am averse to the, I'm really confused here. How if I'm averse to the right, then I'm extrapolating here based on limited data. That's what I'm doing. So if I'm averse to the right, then by default I am what?
You're not right.
Okay, the opposite of right in this case is left, is it not?
Well, that would be up for you to determine your political affiliation.
I mean, by default, based on the given information.
You could be.
If it's a spectrum between left, center, and right, and you say that I'm averse to the right, and then you ask me if I would accept liberal, then based on those two premises, that would be implicitly stating that I am more inclined toward the left, would it not?
That's your interpretation of what I said. That's not what
okay. Well, then give me a logical syllogism of how I'm supposed to interpret your statements.
I already did. You didn't accept the answer. I can't force you to accept my answer.
Your answer is illogical, to tell you the truth. It's very it's a binary.
Okay.
Do you agree that it's a binary? Because this is becoming almost ridiculous.
I do not agree that it's a binary. I do not believe
that. So right. why then would I be averse if it's not a binary? Then is it a trinary? What is it? Is it a trifecta?
It's whatever you want it to be. People have all sorts of political opinions, affiliations, and interpretations.
So why would I be?
I already told you, and I'll tell you again for the third time. I assumed.
Why? Stop right there. Why did you assume?
Well, because most of what I've said that's conservative leaning, you objected to.
Okay, and I'm in a black gun group, which is a right position.
But everybody in this group sounds pretty liberal to me. But
how so?
You're asking me. No. Let's stay on topic here.
Yeah, I'm very curious because you've made a lot of presumptions here.
I'm not gonna go down 15 different angles with you right now.
That's fine.
You to wrap it up. You asked a question. I gave you an answer. You don't like my answer, so you want to argue with me about it.
Your answer doesn't make sense. Logically, it does not make sense.
I'm sorry.
So I'm curious because
it makes sense to you doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense.
It's not subjective. It's a binary. Binaries aren't subjective.
You said it's not subjective. You're right. It's not subjective. I'm trying to remain as objective about this.
No, you're not. If you were, you wouldn't have made that presumption. Would you not?
Okay. Did you make presumptions about me?
No.
Okay.
And in fact, I'll even point out everything that I brought up. It has a reference to something that you've put in the chat. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I've been doing that purposely because you make too many presumptions, and I've noticed that as I read and I sat and I watched you engage with people. Everything that I've mentioned up to this point, every single thing has been a reference to something that you've stated, a position that you've taken up. Everything that you have responded with are presumptions based on what you guessed, and then when I tell you my actual position, that upsets your preconceived notion here, and the fact that shows a clear bias. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I don't agree. Let me ask you a question real quick.
Okay.
Okay. Do you trust the government or not?
What do you mean, do I trust the government?
A yes or no question. Do you
that's an open-ended question, sir. And trust in what capacity?
Do you trust the federal government to make the best decision for your life?
The best decisions as in what? Again, I don't do well with vagaries.
Okay. I appreciate your time. If you want to talk about this later, let me know.
Sure. I'll have time later.
All right. You send me a private message next time you want to talk.
Sure. See you later.
Have a good day.
Bye. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this. And Alicia, are you able to do a call in the Smartass group?
Yes, I am willing to do that call in the Smartass group. I was going to do it here because I wanted to unpack this conversation. But if you want to do it in Smartasses, we can do it in Smartasses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Have fun.